Hi, this is Peggy from Roar. So today our guest is Huda Idrees. So it's a great pleasure to have Huda. Huda is the CEO and founder of DotHealth. DotHealth is a health tech that builds the simplest and easiest way for Canadians to access their health data. So thank you so much for being with us today. That's great to have you.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, and with your wealth of knowledge in technology, financial services, and everything in the Canadian ecosystem, we are very fortunate to have you. So let's get going with that first question. So, what do you think will be the major lasting impacts on the financial services coming from COVID and the crisis we've seen?
Yeah, I think like other industries that have succeeded, I think in finance as well, we're going to see lots of institutions and lots of services move towards a lot more digital of a process. You know, in finance, we have this bad habit of clinging on to processes because it's always been that way. And now that's being shaken to the core. So even simple things like, abstract limits on the amount that you can deposit on a check using your phone, into branch sleeves, or if not, will move to a digital environment in financial services, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you look at that, you're like, why these rules? You have no idea because it's always been this way. So talking about rules and then blending into regulations. So do you see some regulations, changing maybe sometimes to allow this digital progress or something else?
No, for sure. And this is a little bit tangential to the financial services industry, but right when COVID hit, there was a policy change to allow for digital signatures, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in financial services, we also have digital signatures and wet signatures, and there's like a fine line between them. So if you need to move your investments over, if it's a transfer, you need a wet signature. And some financial institutions are big sticklers on that point. But then we saw policy change happen almost overnight. And that was really incredible because I think it's proof that if we want to make change and if we have the will to make that change happen, it can happen very quickly.
Exactly.
Even though all the excuses that we hear all the time are like, oh yeah, that's going to take too long. Oh yeah, that process, it's like impossible to change. Well, now we know it's not impossible. I think the floodgates, so to speak, have opened a bit to policy changes as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point because like you're absolutely right. We use a lot of excuses like that, and then you realize that we were able to do it. So why don't we keep that same rhythm going forward? And I mean, you with the healthcare sector right now is the same mentality where you're like, well, everything is going through the window,
Exactly the same in healthcare. Same thing happened, which is a little bit related to billing. Our billing codes changed in Ontario for the first time ever to allow for virtual visits. And that wasn't the case before. People had to pay out of pocket for virtual care visits. And overnight, Peggy, it created like a new market, which is just incredible how much power policy and legislation really have to having these massive economic impacts, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Talking about financial stability and the global order, what do you see happening with like this huge amount of debt, potential cyber attacks, US, China war? What's your perspective?
Yeah, I think unfortunately with the stability, we're going to see, these sort of effects of this for a long time. A lot of the jobs losses that we've seen across the world have mostly affected women. They've mostly affected the lower rungs of jobs, right? So it's so unfortunate, but like of course, all the cushy execs all have their bonuses and they have their pays and, maybe some of them take a bit of a pay cut, but the people who really struggle are often the people who don't have a nest egg or they don't have that sort of cushion to fall back on. So I think it's going to be really difficult to revamp the jobs back up. And I think that, of course, has a massive impact more than anything on the financial stability in general of economies, but also, even basic things like consumer purchase power. Canada, is built on the backs of small business owners. And if we don't have consumer purchasing power, like small businesses can't survive. And we're seeing them, kind of shut down left, right, and center. So I think it's going to take likely a lot of effort from feds for sure in Canada, and we're also seeing that in the United States, whether it's business loans, whether it's basic income programs that can help buoy some of the effects of COVID. And then the other thing that's a bit more optimistic is the sort of birth of new verticals that can ideally give rise to brand new economies. To help some of the people that have lost their jobs. So I'm hopeful that will be another area.
Yeah, it's there is this conversations I've had with many people, and I'll have this question with you a bit later in terms of your own transformation and how you manage the crisis. And I was chatting with my mother actually this weekend. I was saying that's interesting to say that, oh my God, I use that time to be more mindful, la la la. But you know what? If I were a single mother struggling with 2 children, well, there is not much mindfulness. You're trying to survive, So
totally.
It's a bit the danger with the situation is that I do believe that we tend to stay in our own socio-economic castle.
Right.
And I don't think there is a good understanding, to your point, that SMBs are actually what is holding together Canada.
Absolutely.
And that a lot of the jobs that have been lost won't come back.
Right.
So what's going to happen with the people who are already in very fragile situation?
Yeah.
So it's I think something we tend to forget because we focus on, big banks, startups, exciting stuff, and we think everyone, has the same world around them,
Totally. Like you and I can work from home, right? Really easily with like next to no impact. We can sometimes even be better off working from home. But there are so many like small business owners in my neighborhood. There's so many people that I know who are really hurting, and it's not affecting everybody the same way because, the guy down the street has a little cafe and he mostly relies on foot traffic, and like he can't open that, and like, he feeds his like family of 4 with the income from that cafe, and that can't happen. So like what will that look like? Will he be able to survive? Will he have enough? Will he qualify for a lot of government programs? Are businesses or financial institutions stepping up? I think that's a really big part of it. Of course, there's a number of different programs, like, you can defer your mortgage payments, etc. But then they have an impact on your credit score because credit bureaus are not, backing up. So I think it's a little bit of it's like a double whammy, because you're already in a tricky situation, and then a program tries to come around, tries to help you, but then eventually you get penalized for it down the lane anyway. And I think that is a big, and I'm confident there's a policy response to this that could happen. What I'm not confident in is that it will happen in time to save a lot of people.
Unfortunately, I'm with you on that one. So if we're speaking about repositioning competitive landscape in financial services, so where do you see the potential winners, losers from the crisis coming up right now in the next few months?
Yeah, I think one thing that I think about a lot is sort of it's 2 sides to the same thing. I think there will be a lot of consolidation around this time. We're already starting to see it happen, where traditional financial institutions will start either acquiring or merging, different smaller businesses that are doing certain aspects better than them, perhaps, into their organizations. So I think we're going to see that. Depending on what the situation is of the company, it could be a great win for them, or it could be a big loss, of course. So I think that's definitely going to happen. And then I think any organization that's taking it seriously and actually making moves to try and move in the direction of more technology adoption will win out. You can still see so many financial institutions kind of just like dig their heels in, right? And the ones I'm talking about already. They like they kind of don't care, and like they'll go on with the same processes, and they have like a huge like cushion of money to save them and like help them through this crisis, and then they'll go back to their old ways. And my sense is that consumers and businesses and people will pay attention to how they're being treated during their time of distress, and then I think it's going to be reflected in their choices later on. So if you're a bank that's been less than stellar to your small business owner customers, guess what? The world travels really fast. There's not a lot of banks in Canada, and I think they're going to lose out some business in the future.
Yeah. Well, talking about large financial institutions and incumbents, where do you see the transformation coming? I agree with you, the focus on the clients, which I think we might have forgotten for a long time, is coming back front and center, which is great. In terms of over transformation, whether they are digital or other type of transformation, where do you see big FIs going?
Yeah, I think in terms of my biggest sort of like worry comes in, it's not like the big financial institutions don't know what they're doing wrong. They've known for decades, and I think they haven't had that like will to transform. So I think that's really where the like core difference you're going to see happen, is whether they sort of like go over the fence from being so on simple, small, little interactions that are very consumer centric, fully over to no, we have to be a consumer centric model. And unfortunately, in Canada's like oligopoly, there's not a lot. It's basically a divide and conquer approach. There's not a lot of competition. Everyone has their like small little area figured out. So my hope is that whether it's through policy legislation or whether it's through consumer demand, that we actually see an opportunity for new entrants to be their own companies. So I would love to see neobanks in Canada. I would love to see companies that are not just built on the same rails as some of the large banks, but are instead completely changing the equation. We've seen that across Europe multiple times over, and we've seen them create these massive markets. Why do we not do that in Canada? I would love to see some like even basic open banking regulations take a foothold. And this is such a good time to do that because we have all the excuses and all the reasons in the world to support it.
Well, what's interesting is that actually the consultation on open banking have been pushed away because of COVID. So it seems like you're taking the other way around, saying it's the perfect time to push it.
Oh goodness!
It's.
I hear you.
It's a tough one as well. Canada, 35 million people, making something that can be profitable on such a small footprint is always challenging. And to your point, try to fight 5 behemoth or 6 behemoth, depending on how you look at it. That's a very tough one. So changing gear, but sticking with transformation. So what did you change in your life in the last few months? What are the new things that hopefully great habits that you embraced in your life?
In terms of personal stuff, the biggest change for me, and this seems like a really simple one for everybody, but even though I've worked in tech my entire career, I wasn't a full convert to the remote work environment. And I am now. I fully converted. My team, the team at DotHealth is so productive and so happy not having to commute in, even though they like love and miss the office. At the same time, the like extra sort of buffer that they have is helping them build routines that are a lot healthier in some cases. Which we're really liking quite a bit. So even though I would normally wake up very early in the morning, I would just be in this like rush to get ready and get out the door. Whereas now I'm much more likely to like get up and go for a run. I'm much more likely to accommodate for certain things, like call friends and family a lot more, things like that, where we have like scheduled virtual game nights and video calls with people. I feel way more connected to people, honestly, than I have in a long time.
I know.
Which is really lovely. I wish I could. My friends are kind of spread all over the world.
That's the thing. Yeah.
It's so nice to be able to just like hang with them. It kind of makes you feel like they're right here.
Yeah. I've done like you way more conference, Zoom or other things with my family, which I wouldn't have done otherwise. Like I've spent a lot of times actually doing exactly like you, booking the time, and
Mhm.
my mother, my aunt, my cousins, everyone. We've never done that once. I've been here for 17 years.
Right?
So it's odd to say that actually it brought us closer.
And I guess it's because everyone's in the same situation, right?
Exactly.
Like everyone is in like a semi-lockdown or some kind of quarantine or whatever. And if they weren't, I think the lack of travel, even though I love travel, the lack of travel has completely opened up people's schedules in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
I would have never thought. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah, I know, and I see the same. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. It was super insightful.
No, thank you for having me. Really, this is lovely, and I think we do need to have a lot of these conversations to, either help people think or, move in a direction of the world that we want to be able to live in.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you so much, Huda. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Have a
Bye.
good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.